And other doctors in Dana-Farber told us that the cancer will continue to grow.
And they listed every single way that you would die from Hodgkin's.
No father wants to see his kid die before him.
I did not want to get the chemotherapy.
We just kept telling him, you're just going to have to do it, though.
That's all we know. We said, you're going to have to do it.
We didn't know there was other options, other things that he could do.
I knew there was going to come a time when it was just going to be too much, and I felt that I would rather die from the cancer than from the chemotherapy.
He was very determined to find his way through this disease, but doing things his own way.
Welcome to The Incurables. I'm Don Wildman. When we get sick, most of us do what seems logical. We seek medical attention. Our doctors diagnose, offer prescriptions, and we follow their advice. But sometimes that's not enough. Billy Best was an adventurous teenager with his whole life ahead of him. But when stricken with cancer, Billy was given a protocol that he felt was more deadly than the disease. The rebellious spirit of youth would drive him away from convention and towards finding a natural cure. Bill and Sue Best, a Massachusetts couple who desperately wanted a family, were unable to have children of their own. They were delighted when they were able to adopt Bill Jr. and Jenny.
We were adopted from different families, so it was pretty funny because we didn't look too much alike.
Billy was normally the one that people might notice was adopted with a little bit darker skin. I tended to maybe blend in, maybe with my parents a little more.
Reactions from people around us, people I didn't even know, would buy us gifts and send us cards and things because they were so excited for us to adopt two kids. I mean, it was awesome.
I always felt it was a very special thing, you know, a special bond in our family.
I think you do treasure your children because you had to wait, and waiting was very difficult, and we really wanted kids, so it was wonderful once they came.
The Bests eventually settled in Santa Cruz, California, a utopia for raising children.
Billy really thrived in California. He was a typical boy, riding his bikes, and you know, I was too.
He loved the warm weather, just the whole California scene. Somewhere along the way, he met someone, started skateboarding, and he's still doing it today, all these years later.
The Best family left California and returned to Massachusetts to be closer to family. Billy, a confident, determined teenager, made new friends and honed his skateboarding skills.
Billy, in his early teen years, again, was still an avid skateboarder.
Definitely a go-getter. He always wanted to take it to the next level skateboard. He was always a really determined kid.
But he also was his own person. He didn't like to be told what to do.
He's just very private, and he keeps his feelings in, and you know, sometimes he'll answer your questions, but he's kind of in his own thing. He wants to find his own answers to things.
If I had something that bothered me, I'd just go out and play soccer or skateboard and deal with it that way.
I think a lot of times I was the bad guy because I was strict, and I would, you know, punish him.
He was hard to handle just because he wanted to do things his way.
But overall, we had a good relationship.
Billy's boldness had played in his favor many times. But one weekend, the 14-year-old skater's bravado resulted in serious injury.
I had a friend of mine, he was my best friend at the time. His name's Alex, and we were gonna put our money together and build a skateboard ramp in my backyard.
One Saturday, he and his friend went down to the local hardware store. They needed something, nails or whatever.
We ended up just taking too long, and it got dark by the time we started our way back home. We were just skating pretty fast and not watching where we were going. I turned around and yelled at him to hurry up, and when I turned back around, I just saw lights, like bright lights, and it was the landscaping truck. The big mirrors that hang off, that caught my arm, and I ripped the mirror off the truck, but my arm just kind of fell.
It was held on just by a couple pieces of skin.
The phone rang, and it was a police officer saying, "Your son has been hit by a car."
I don't know how you can be mad at someone in so much pain.
He ended up having, I believe it was 6 operations over a 2-year period of time.
It was a lot of stress. I mean, just the initial trauma and being in the hospital and being on the medication and having surgery, like those things are a lot of stress on your body.
His life changed. He couldn't do sports through a lot of the time because he was in a cast. He would have to have this surgery on the tendon, or he would not be using his hand for the rest of his life. And he just kept saying, "I don't want any more surgeries." He had already had 4. And we tried to convince him that this was the right thing to do, and finally I said, "Well, Billy, you have to have the operation." By this point in his life, he'd get quiet and just seemed to be resigned to the situation.
After years of reconstructive surgery and rehabilitation, Billy's life returned to normal. He was able to resume his skateboarding, but he had no idea of the danger that lay ahead.
I was a freshman in high school, and it was just almost the summertime. We were going on a trip down to Washington, D.C.
We weren't allowed to bring our skateboards. We managed to like smuggle them and then bribe the bus driver to meet us down the street after he dropped us off to, give us our skateboards.
And we just, we went and saw the sights, and we got to see the Capitol building, and we got to go on tours of the U.S. Mint, and it was just a great weekend. On the way back was when I really had a tight back and a tight neck, and it really hurt when I turned it, and it was sore right there. Like a week or 2 went by, and I was not acting how I usually act.
Billy came down to my office. He wasn't feeling that great, so I took a look at him and noticed he had this lump on his neck. And I said, "Well, I think this is something we probably should have checked out just to see what's going on. Some kids sometimes it's a sore throat, swollen lymph glands, you don't know." So called his mom and told her what I had seen, and said that I really recommend that you have the pediatrician take a look at it.
The doctor said, "Well, it's a lymph node. Did you have a cold recently?" And Billy said yes. He said, "Probably nothing to worry about, but if it gets any bigger, you come back and see me."
The lump came back, and it was bigger, and it was really swollen. I couldn't turn my neck, and it was just, I was sore and I was tired. I couldn't stay awake in school.
They did an x-ray, and first we went to see the doctor upstairs. We went downstairs to the x-ray room, and I had forgotten something, and I went back upstairs to the doctor's office.
She saw the nurses looking at the x-ray, and they looked concerned. And when they turned and looked at her, saw her coming in, they kind of gave her a look like, oh, like a real sorry look.
The doctors feared the worst and explained to Sue that additional tests would be necessary.
The doctor had certain hours you could call him, so I was going to call him around noon to find out about the test. And the doctor said, "Well, I think your son has a form of lymphoma, possibly Hodgkin's disease." I just was flabbergasted, but also keeping a straight face because Billy was right there.
She hangs up, and I say, "Oh, what'd he say?" She said, she's like, "Well, they think it's Hodgkin's." And she did a good job, until they were sure, until they were 100% that it was cancer. She didn't want to, say that word. So
Billy went to his room, and I went down and just started crying. And my husband looked at me in shock. He couldn't even imagine what was going on, and I just screamed, "Billy's got cancer."
We were actually both crying because we just didn't know what else to do. It's a terrible thing. When you hear your kid has cancer, you just go, "What? Can't be true. Can't be true."
Even as Billy was scheduled for a biopsy at Boston's Dana-Farber Cancer Institute, the family was dealt another huge blow. Bill Sr.'s sister Judy died while receiving chemotherapy for breast cancer.
My dad was shook up because, again, no father wants to see his kid die before him. And I'm going, in retrospect, I'm going, geez, I'm going through the same thing here. I called Sue, told her.
My husband said, you'll have to take Billy in the morning for the biopsy, and we'll let Jenny know. My husband decided he'd go up and pick her up. So in the morning, I took him into Dana-Farber, and I had to put on the greatest acting job of my life and not tell him that Judy had died.
I was confused because we went into the building and it said Dana-Farber Cancer Institute.
And he said, Cancer Institute? Why are we here? He had not known that lymphoma was a type of cancer.
So that's when it hit me. This was like serious stuff.
We went into the Jimmy Fund Clinic, which is all children, and there was tons of little kids in there that day, bald, hooked up to chemo. I was dying inside, thinking that what's going through his mind, and he's watched his aunt getting sicker and sicker, and now it's suddenly in his face that he might have cancer.
Bill picked Jenny up at camp and started the long drive back to Massachusetts for her aunt's funeral. She wasn't aware of Billy's diagnosis.
We were in the car driving back home and on the highway going very fast. And my father told me that he needed to tell me something. And that was when he told me that Billy had cancer.
The look on her face was like horror.
You know, my dad's driving the car, and I just remembered I wanted to get out.
And she opened the car door like she was gonna jump out, and I grabbed her, I go, what are you doing?
That was hard. That was a really hard time.
Sue and I are Christians, and you know, we have a faith in Jesus, but you go, what is going on here? Why? You know, you think you're good people, and you think all this, and it still happens to you.
That night when I got home from the hospital, it was strange because my sister was home, and you know, my parents were home, and they were all crying. I thought it was because I was, you know, getting tested for cancer, but they told me that it was Aunt Judy who had died. While she was getting chemotherapy, it was just too much, and you know, the chemotherapy just killed her. That's the moment when I really felt like I did not want to get the chemotherapy. I already had a lot of surgeries done, and I was really sick of going to the hospital, and now, you know, the only person in my family that I knew that went through chemotherapy was now dead, and it wasn't from the cancer, it was from, you know, how toxic the treatment was, so I didn't want to do it.
I didn't know at the time, because he wasn't communicating. He was thinking that Judy's doctor kept saying, we're going to try another chemo, we're going to find the chemo that's going to cure you, and she just kept getting sicker and sicker.
I remember seeing him sit on a couch at the funeral home and just thinking, like, what's going through his mind? He's at a funeral for somebody who's passed away from this disease, and he's sitting here knowing that he's just about to embark on this disease himself.
Hodgkin's disease, technically Hodgkin's lymphoma, a cancerous malignancy, attacks the lymphatic system, a crucial part of the immune system. The disease starts with abnormal growth of lymphatic tissue, most often in the chest, neck, or under the arms. It then spreads to other vital parts of the body, destroying its ability to fight infection.
They were going to have me do the chemo because it's the only option that we had. There was nothing else that we could have been doing.
We just kept telling him, you're just going to have to do it, Bill.
And I knew that they were going to stand by that. It made sense.
Sue and I said, well, that's all we know. And we said, you're going to have to do it because, you know, you got to get well, Bill. And that's what the doctors say, and you're going to do what the doctors tell you.
He was just silent, and you knew he was mad and unhappy, but he didn't vocalize that at all.
I'd just gotten out of my freshman year at high school, and I was really looking forward just to get out and enjoy my summer.
Unwilling to spend his entire summer in the hospital, Billy convinced his parents and doctors to give him 2 weeks of freedom before beginning chemotherapy.
On Fridays, when I went to get chemotherapy, it would take all day. I wouldn't get home until 5 at night. I didn't really feel sick from the chemo, so I thought, well, maybe this isn't going to be that bad. But then some of the other chemos were in big syringes, like thick plungers, and they would just push it right into you. I didn't want to completely phase out. I wanted to still be there while it was going on, so I'm trying to talk to the nurses. And she came over and she had, you know, rubber gloves on, and she hooks the tube up and starts pushing the medicine in me. But then she gets to this one medicine, it's in like a protective bag so that the light doesn't hit it. And she put another like real thick pair of rubber gloves on. And she, you know, I was asking her as she was hooking it up, you know, why do you need all those rubber gloves? And she looked and she's like, are you kidding me? She's like, if I push this in too fast and it leaks out, this could burn right through my skin. After my second treatment, my hair started falling out. I didn't want to be, you know, want to have like all patchy hair, so I just asked my dad right there, I was like, can you just like shave it all off?
He was actually happier, I think, because the hair was off and he didn't have to see it falling out anymore.
As the treatments went on, it would take longer to recover. I just really started to feel myself like sliding, and each week when I went back to the hospital, it seemed like there were less kids going in. Like, you know, some of the kids I'd seen getting treatment one week that didn't look good, they weren't there the next week. So either they were too sick to get the treatment or they had died.
Unfortunately, we didn't know anything to do to build him up. We asked the doctors, should we give him vitamins? Don't waste your money. Should we change his nutrition? Let him have anything he wants.
The chemotherapy was working. By the time Billy was back in school, the cancer had virtually disappeared.
The doctors were delighted. Billy said, good, can I stop the chemo? And they said, oh no, we have no research that shows that the cancer wouldn't come back. You've got to complete the rest of the program.
And I really, you know, I was really desperate. I felt really trapped. I just had these real strong feelings like I had to get away and get out of the situation that I was in.
We went to church on a Wednesday night. I left earlier because I had to be there first. My husband came later. We met up a little bit later, and he said, where's Billy? And I said, I thought he came with you. And he said, no, he wasn't at the house. And I didn't really think too much of it. And my husband was very bothered.
I don't know what it was. You know, it's like a sixth sense. I'm saying something's not right here.
He got home from church first and went in the house. Billy wasn't there. And when I came in the door, he had his hand on the phone and he was crying. He had a note in his hand.
His bureau on the corner of it, he left a note. And it's unbelievable, the note he left. It just, you know, it just brings you to tears.
We were doing what we thought was best for him, but he just couldn't do it anymore.
Diagnosis of Hodgkin's lymphoma, Billy's doctors administered chemotherapy, provoking painful memories of the toxic protocol that had claimed his aunt's life. But Billy had an elaborate plan to escape this fate.
I didn't know when I was going to leave, but I knew there was going to come a time when it was just going to be too much. And I felt that I would rather die from the cancer than from the chemotherapy. Quietly, I just packed my bags, kept them under my bed, started selling like skateboard parts and videos so I could get some money. One day, I told my mom I didn't feel good enough to go to church. I was going to stay home, and you know, right after she left, I called up my friend Craig to get a ride to the train to Boston.
He told me that he was going to be going to visit some friends to go skateboarding, which absolutely did not make me, you know, second guess any of his motives on what he was doing.
Craig didn't even realize that he was taking Billy to run away, you know.
All I had was a duffel bag and a skateboard, and probably maybe $300 or $400.
Conversations in the car, the whole ride up, perfectly normal, everything was fine. He did not seem like anything was going on or anything crazy.
I knew it was going to be getting cold, so I wanted to go south and I wanted to go west. My vision of what was going to happen was go to California and just, you know, maybe one night just fall asleep on the beach watching the sunset and, you know, just die in my sleep.
We were totally shocked. We had no idea that he was planning this, that he felt that intense that he had to leave his family.
That was really weird, like that no one knew. You know, even like his closest friends didn't know it.
The less people knew, the safer I was going to be.
I remember being kind of mad at him. And at the time, he was 16 years old, so being mad at him for being irresponsible is almost silly, but I was a little just obviously shocked, but just I didn't understand why. And at that point, we didn't know there was other options, other things that he could do.
I had no plans on ever seeing anyone. You know, Craig was going to be the last person that I saw that I knew, and I left my parents a note before I left.
Dear Mom and Dad, by the time you read this note, I hope to be gone. Please forgive me. I love you both very much, and Jenny also. I am not unhappy with my life. I feel like the medicine is killing me instead of helping me. This is not a last-minute decision. Please have faith in God and know that I will be all right. I'm so sorry. Love always, Billy.
For 2 days, Billy rode the bus southwest across the country. He had no idea what lay ahead. Alone and exhausted, Billy ended up in Houston, where he befriended local skaters, telling them he had run away because of family problems. They were sympathetic and offered him a place to stay.
They said that if I wanted to stay, they had a storage warehouse that they used as a clubhouse, and it had couches and tables, and I could stay there. Like, no one would bother me if I stayed there. And then after school, I could meet up with them. And when they were at school during the day, I'd stay pretty much inside, so I didn't want to get arrested. They'd pick me up when they got out of school, and we'd go skate, we'd go get something to eat. I'd go to their houses so I could take a shower. That all went on for about a week.
Back in Massachusetts, Bill and Sue were told that their son would die if he did not continue with the chemotherapy. They contacted Billy's friends, but they had no idea of his whereabouts. The Bests were desperate.
We were calling the police every day. Nothing happened. We realized we were on our own.
The prospect of losing their only son to cancer horrified the Best family. While they were frightened by Billy's rebellious behavior, it was his steadfast determination to play by his own rules that ultimately saved his life.